You know, with my experience as a wrestling journalist, I've used many podcast providers for my wrestling shows, but nothing has seemed to work. However, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You guys are listening to the Jordan Garber Now podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Are you looking for the best vehicle for your needs at an affordable budget? Well, Hickman Auto Sales and Financing has exactly what you're looking for. Choose from a wide variety of vehicles like the 2012 Hyundai Tucson GLS, the 2016 Chrysler 200LX, and the 2020 Chevrolet Tahoe. All trades are accepted and paid off, and child tax, pension, disability, EI, social assistance, or self-employed are all approved. Low payments of $0 down. For more information, call 204-898-3511 or visit HickmanAutoFinancing.com. Tell them Jordan Garber Now sent you. Welcome to another episode of the Jordan Garber Now podcast, and we are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Today we have two jam-packed interviews. Our main event interview is with none other than CWE star, the mastermind, Kevin Cannon. And as well, our first interview of the day will be with none other than Austin Towers. But first, I do want to say, listen to the commercials on this show, and please support our sponsors. Without our sponsors, Jordan Garber is not what it is today. And we are having the Road Warrior Animal coming up in September, and more big names to be announced. So stay tuned to Jordan Garber Now, and please support our sponsors. The interviews on Jordan Garber Now are coming up next after this commercial break. Do you remember Real Aid Media? Well, the creator of that has another solution for you. Check it out. This is an emergency kit and a home safety evaluation for free. This kit has 180 pieces, such as a blanket, light stick, flashlight, cold pack, burn cream, and much, much more. This company is giving them away free to qualified homeowners, as well as a complimentary home safety evaluation for advertising purposes. The link available here is surveymonkey.com/r/204B. That's surveymonkey.com/r/204B. Check it out now. Welcome everybody to the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Yes, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. We are here with none other than the 7-foot man himself, the Tower, the Austin Towers, I should say. How's it going, man? Great to have you on the program.
I'm good, man. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I can't complain. And wow, when it comes to training and ground roots and building from the ground up, you certainly are most familiar with that. Training with the WWA4 Wrestling School, none other than former WWF star, legendary Mr. Hughes. Actually, who might be on this show in the future down the road. So how was that experience? You know, you're learning now from one of the best. He's passing the torch along to you in that ring training as you're hungry to compete and get in there. So what was it like, you know, learning from one of the best?
Well, Mr. Hughes definitely knows a lot. I'll definitely tell you that. And he definitely has a lot of knowledge as far as what to do in and out of the ring and everything. So, you know, to keep it straight with you, you know, Mr. Hughes did not like me at first. So I didn't really get to pick his brain a lot because, you know, every trainer has his favorites, and I wasn't one of them. So even though I have lasted this long without him, You know what I'm saying? I can't take away from the fact that he had the wrestling school and that the little training that he did give me kind of helped in the long run. But he's a pretty insightful guy when it comes to wrestling.
That's for sure. It all started out with you in Atlanta, Georgia, working those shows at, multiple venues across there and just doing that pretty much throughout 2015, 2016, alongside with WWW and PSW. But for the most part, it was all Mr. Hughes and WWA 4, working guys like Joe Hyken, Prince Apollo, Ashton Starr,
yes, sir.
and
yes, sir.
in TNA now, Impact Wrestling's own Kiera Hogan. So, working all these guys, like your first match, getting this exposure, them being maybe in there a little longer, maybe some being in there the same amount of time. What were the beginnings of chemistry that you learned to develop during that time?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I have played a lot of sports before I got into professional wrestling. So having to transition from that to wrestling was a bit of a learning curve for me. You go into from the basketball court, from the football field into the wrestling ring. It's kind of like a culture shock. So it kind of took a little bit for me to kind of get the hang of things. But once it clicked, it clicked. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like every wrestler kind of has that moment where they're kind of struggling at first, trying to learn the steps and making sure they get all the correct formations and everything right. And then when it clicks, it's just, boom, there's a whole new world of wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. And, that's the thing, is we all share one thing in common, and that's the love of professional wrestling. But, what? Something that caught my eye was something I just kind of touched very quickly was Anarchy Wrestling, a really well-known company there in Atlanta. And you had a show there at the church in Cornelia. I believe that was against the Viking War Party. So
yes, that was under the it was under Why We Wrestle.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yes.
How was that, man? That must have been great. That must have been a big crowd.
It was a decent crowd. It was a decent crowd. And Anarchy is definitely one of those, like you said, it's one of those staple shows here in Georgia. I'd say definitely top 3 as far as Georgia shows that you would want to get on. So, being in the ring with Viking War Party, both of those guys, they're hungry individuals. They're very serious about what they do, especially the now Warhorse, as we've seen the success and momentum that guy has had. So it's cool seeing that, people that you kind of started out wrestling at first to finally kind of get some exposure. So it's cool. It's real cool.
Awesome. What about PSW? That was also Pro South Wrestling down there in Alabama, I believe. You worked with the likes of Alistair. You were teamed with. You actually had a group there called the Left Hand Path. How did that turn into development?
Well, when I first started out, I kind of was getting in the groove of things, and then I got approached by Eric Silva. He actually he would come to the weekly WWE 4 Thursday shows. He saw me wrestle, and it kind of extended the invitation to be a part of the Left Hand Path, which we are still active today. And it's funny that you mentioned Pro South, because I'm actually going to be wrestling there this Friday against Jeter, if you don't know who that guy is. But he's another dude who is about 6'10", 6'11", and reaching almost about 400 pounds. So we're supposed to be having a last man standing match over at Piedmont, Alabama. So that's going to be absolute war, and I can't wait. I can't wait.
How about you worked also let's go back down to this year, kind of fast tracking a lot. Hold My Beer Hansen. What a unique character. What a unique I just love it, man. That's just something that's innovative and original. How was working him? He had a good solid 9-minute match there at the Civic Center in Bremen. Was like anything special to point out about that match, if you can recall, there in March?
Hold My Beer Hansen. Man, oh man, Hold My Beer Hansen. He is 100% a character. The guy with I would say a guy with a great heart, probably, drinks too much beer to be a professional wrestler. But as far as what he's shown in the ring, he's got to show a little bit more. Once I had that one-on-one with him, I believe you're mentioning it was at Peach State.
Yes, Peach
I
State
had my
Wrestling
match with him.
Alliance.
Peach State Wrestling, yes, yeah. Unfortunately, he just couldn't cut the mustard. He just wasn't good enough. And unfortunately, in the business, you can't always be a nice guy, and he had to learn, and I had to put him in his place. So it's unfortunate for him, but hopefully it's a learning experience. Hopefully.
Well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So
of course.
Let's talk about chemistry. I just see Wrestler's Lab here, and before I talk about that, I just want to kind of ask about the beginnings. Like I think we talked about the beginnings of chemistry, but what were some guys though, like in the middle of your career, that you just really could just have a good match with and just click and connect with the whole time?
Okay, it's in the middle of my career. So, first off, he's not my tag team partner. Aside from the left-hand path, his name is Aaron Black, and we're called the West Coast Kings, and we're actually current tag team champions over at GIPW in Macon, Georgia.
Nice.
So he's definitely one of them. I had a lot of great matches. In the middle of my career, I was in Rocket City, and that was in Hazel Green, Alabama. Let's see, from just off the top of my head, Trey Franklin, the Demon Freak, let's see, Caden Sade, Mike Cobb. Hopefully I'm not forgetting too many names, but everybody over there, those are just some of the few that I've really come to have some good chemistry with, and especially not forgetting any of the WWE 4 guys. Since we trained together, we kind of know who does what and how we move, since we all trained at the same spot. So, guys like Astro Star, Joe Hyken was one of my favorites before he took a break on wrestling. Prince Apollo, Axel Ross, that dude. Those guys are absolutely amazing guys, and honestly, I'd say they can put on just as much of the show as I can, if not more.
Great stuff. Now talk about your signature moves here. We got the world's tallest slam and the hanging headlocks and the Tropium's Law. What were kind of
Tropium's Law? Yes.
Tropium's
Law. It's a weird name to pronounce. Not many people know about that word, but yeah, no. Tropium's Law.
How was that created? Like, how did that start? Because that's like I don't even know what that word means, man.
So, okay. So Tropium is it's a thing called Tropium's Tower, and it's what I kind of base myself off as far as character-wise. Now,
military victory.
So what now?
Is that what
it's like that. Tropium is the tower, and at the top of the tower you have the king. And on that top of the tower, he has to defend that point at all times. And if he loses, he gets thrown off. The law is that if he loses his spot, he gets thrown off of Tropium's tower. And if he survives the fall, then he has to make his way back up from the bottom. And the Tropium's Law was my chicken wing gut buster, which I would lift him up in the air and I would drop him on my knees. And that's where it came from. I don't use it as much anymore. I now use a bicycle kick and a layout choke slam as my finishes now. So those are, I'm kind of, ever since I've had those, I've definitely stepped up my repertoire of moves, so I can be more versatile and more dangerous whoever I face. You know what I'm saying? No matter what size.
Besides WWE and AEW and even Impact Wrestling, in terms of the international wrestling product, what products do you have in mind, and what countries do you usually enjoy watching to enhance your style? Besides the States.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's nothing really in particular that I watch. It's more or less people in particular. The people that I watched growing up that I really studied was old school Kane, old school Undertaker. You had dudes like Triple H up in New Japan, and even in Impact. One of my favorites, Nigel McGuinness. which was one of my favorites. Which in the beginning of my career, I based off a lot of my moves off of him. Brody Lee, which everybody knows is Luke Harper. He's in AEW right now as Brody Lee, but he was another guy that I really watched. So it wasn't really particularly. I stayed looking at one product. It's more or less who caught my eye and who I really want to kind of just study and see how they move and see if I can kind of add that into my move set or kind of based off the psychology of what they do.
That's
Make
pretty much
myself a little
Southern.
better.
That's pretty much Southern style
Yeah.
wrestling too. So and
Of
I
course,
love
yeah.
that. I love that style, and that's
Of
why I love
course.
talking to like wrestlers like yourself from down there because you guys are the most authentic form of what the territories were back then. You look at NWA down there in Tennessee, or you go down
Oh
there
yeah.
to Cornelia, Georgia, NWA Wildside back in the day. That actually felt like those territories still existed, and Georgia has that legacy of pro wrestling. It's probably one of the most prestigious wrestling history places in all of America, besides like Philadelphia, New York.
The South in itself is a gold mine when it comes to wrestling, and people it thrived so much back in the day, and it's lost a lot of its I don't want to say loss of its flavor, but it's definitely a loss of its kick, and it needs to come back 100%. Hopefully, with these the COVID-19, hopefully when that dies down and everything kind of picks back up, hopefully we can bring that back up to its prestige level that it used to be. You know what I'm saying? So one step at a time.
Absolutely. All we can do is live one day at a time. And before we wrap things up here, what's the road like down where you are? Different locker rooms are different and things like that. But do you have like a road story for us before we wrap things up? Something to take home with the fans listening, from Winnipeg to Kenya to all the way to New Zealand or Australia and beyond.
Oh man, you asked a question that I have way too many answers for, my man. Let's see. Okay, well, since we talked about Hughes, there's a thing that all the that all the wrestlers that trained over there knows is that Hughes he broke his middle finger on his right hand, and he refused to get it fixed, and so his middle finger is permanently straight. He can't bend it. So a lot of times when people come up to him and they ask for a fist bump or something like that, it looks like he's flipping them off but giving a fist bump at the same time. So a lot of people come in and they get like offended, but they're like, no, that's just his finger. and he'll just point with that little middle finger because he knows that that's the only finger that points out. So no, Mr. Hughes, man. So many stories, man. I'd take up way too much of your time if I was just talking about him, man.
Well, we already heard some amazing Jake Roberts stories on the last interview, and now some Mr. Hughes on one. Austin Towers, thanks for bringing your size and your domination in the ring here on the Jordan Garber Now podcast for the world to listen to.
Awesome.
Are you looking for cards for any occasion, whether that's weddings, birthday parties, or just straight out for fun? Well, check out mytradingcards.com, and they can create any trading card for you, the official trading card of the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Lots of wrestling news for us as of late, and obviously news that each and every one of you guys have heard of, but it is very important to recap and maybe hear a little bit of analysis on this. Dominic Mysterio, a possible name change. They're going to potentially be looking into changing the name of Dominic Mysterio into Prince Mysterio. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get him some more training and give him some more experience. And what Rey Mysterio said, quote, is that they're trying to incorporate the good story between the fans and the rich history of Lucha Libre and the masks. So I think that's really exciting. I think that should be really, really awesome. Renee Young reportedly, leaving the WWE. It showed that she gave her notice to the company 1 week ago, and she did take some time off earlier this summer after testing positive for COVID-19. So she did appear on some WWE programming since then, but she also did reveal plans for her first cookbook. So all the best to Renee Young in her future. You know, that one of another talent that started out here in Canada, out at the Score. And I watched Aftermath. What a great program that show is. I believe it's still on the Score and or Sportsnet. And literally, Renee Young worked so hard. She got drafted to the Score. She entered a competition to be an announcer. She won the competition out of hundreds of people, worked for the Score for a year, and signed with WWE and had an absolutely amazing run. So good for her. Just nothing but good vibes to her. But Stardom, in bad news here, more bad news. Stardom has canceled the rest of August events due to a member testing positive for COVID-19. Wrestling in Japan was usually running really strong during the pandemic, and now with Stardom shutting down, that's a huge blow right now. I just really hope that everybody can stick together during this pandemic and get through this, because it's not only affecting us and our families, it's affecting the things we love and everyone around us, and it just sucks to see a world go into this kind of craziness and pandemic state. And what are you going to do? You got to do what you got to do to be safe for all the wrestlers, and good on Stardom for that. But, man, I just really hope that pandemic ends soon, because, ends soon. Apparently I can't speak today, but, no, I really want that pandemic to end soon, because it's not good at all for the wrestling business. And that leads me to, this is something that you'd see in a dream. WWE is coming up with the Thunderdome, which I'm excited, because as a pro instead of a con, you actually have a chance to be on WWE. So obviously I'm going to be signing up for the Thunderdome and things like that, but it's like 1999, full crowds in big arenas, Allstate Arena packed, the Spectrum packed, anywhere in Philadelphia, any arena there packed, and now it's like we have a virtual audience, and it looks like it's just we're in the future now. We're just so far into the future, and it's unbelievable. It really is how it's come to this. But I'm excited about the Thunderdome. I think it's very exciting, and I think it gives everybody an opportunity to share their voice and be on television. So I think that's really cool. What else? Bret Hart's content has been removed from the WWE Network as well. I'm going to provide more of that on the news update, which I provide to you guys a few times every week, available on Facebook and YouTube. But they also revealed trademark filings for the WWE Thunderdome, and there's going to be a WWE draft, teasing that the stars may be drafted from the main roster to NXT, kind of making it what it used to be with the ECW brand. So that should be a little exciting. There's a lot going on in wrestling, but a lot needs to go on in wrestling to survive these tough times and survive this pandemic. So hopefully history keeps happening, good things keep happening, and eventually this pandemic can come to an end and we can all go back to normal once and for all, that's for sure. Anyways, that was pretty much the news portion of this show. Still stay tuned. Later tonight, our interview with Kevin Cannon up next on Jordan Garber Now.
Newest and hottest in the world of pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on Powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 6,000 hours of the best events from over 150 of your favorite promotions from 20 different countries around the globe. Brands like Progress Wrestling, Evolve Wrestling, Combat Zone, Defy, PCW Ultra, PWX, Over the Top, Shine, and hundreds of others with fresh content added every day for only $5.99 per month. Get your free trial today at Powerslam.tv.
You heard them. Use promo code POWERSLAM now. All right, we are back here on the Jordan Garber Now podcast with none other than one of the most disliked guys, safe to say, in Winnipeg wrestling right now. One of the top, rebels of the CWE, just causing havoc everywhere. Kevin Cannon, great to have you on the show, man.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And just to be clear,
there's a guy that I'm not too happy with in the Winnipeg scene right now, so I'd really, really appreciate it if you don't use the word rebel in connection to my name. Anything else is fine. I don't know if I'm too fond of being referred to as rebel. I don't want people to think I'm still associated with a certain somebody who has left my employ very recently.
But before we get to that, like, it comes to think, you and this guy we don't want to name, you guys have had a long history together. So, maybe let's look at the big picture. Do you see yourself, teaming with him and adding him to the Cannon Clan down the road, or is he done? That's it. He's finished.
Oh no, we're the corporation now. We dropped the clan. We're the clan corporation now. But he is done. He will never, ever again be part of any kind of corporation, organization, infrastructure, anything at all that I have any say in, that I even have one poker in the fire in. He will never, ever be a part of anything to do with me.
Oh my. Well, those are some big words. We're going to have to get him on the podcast to respond. But let's talk about the early days, like way back when with Don Callis. This guy is responsible for training, some of the greats, not just in Manitoba wrestling, but throughout North America. So what was that style like? Like, what kind of style? You have like kind of like a brawler, showman style. So like, what did you learn in terms of the fundamentals like right away that you still use to this day?
Don taught me a lot. And I really wish I could have had something else to measure it up to compare it to back then. I had never set foot in a wrestling ring or a training facility of any kind before my first day of camp with Don Callis, but Don's methods of training and just his overall knowledge of the industry and the psychology that goes into it and the physicality of it and the drills he put us through and everything he put us through was amazing. He's got a great mind for the business, but he told us right on the first day what he was going to do, and he did it. He said, I am going to break all of you down mentally and physically, and then I'm going to build you back up how I want you to be. And that's what he did. That's what he proceeded to do over the course of the next 8 weeks, 5 days a week, 4 or 5 hours a day. He did it right up until we were ready to go for our very first match.
Well, kind of like that military style training. How hard was that adjustment? Get up and go, get up and go, get up and go. Was that something that you just had in your work ethic, or did that take some adjustment just being young and green?
Work ethic wise, yeah, I wasn't mentally. I wasn't going to let anything stop me from completing it and doing it and doing what I could with it. Physically, though, I really wish I had prepared myself more for it. And if there's anything I could ever recommend to anybody considering becoming a professional wrestler, it is get yourself in the best physical shape that you can possibly first, and then take that next step and finding the right training camp and people to teach you what it is. Because if you do it in the opposite order, which was I was just too thoughtless and naive, and that's what I did, you'll be in a world of hurt. So physically, it was tough. I wasn't used to that kind of training and grind, and just everything was it all served a purpose, and it all really did help, and it all said, hey, this. It basically set the tone for nothing is going to be easy. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard, and it's always going to be hard. But if you want to do it, here's what we got to do. So I did eventually, take my training and conditioning and my physical shape more seriously. But I really wish I would have done that first rather than train first and then get into the best shape that I can get into. But yeah, he really made it tough physically. Just all the drills, all the calisthenics, the training, and every single part of it. And there was no, okay, that's good enough. It's like, nope, we're not moving on until everyone does this. Nope, you finish your 50 push-ups, 50 squats, 50 sit-ups. Nope, you guys run your laps. And then when the last person is back, then we start a next drill. I don't care if that person has to crawl. We're doing it. Like he was adamant about everybody completing everything together as a team, and we did it.
So, that time must have flew by, before we get onto the River City Wrestling and Norquay Community Club in those good old days. Like, when you were finished that, did the time just fly by fast? Did you feel, like, well accomplished because you put work into something and you get the overall result? So, like, were you much better in-ring and more confident having your first match after that for RCW? If that was where you debuted, or was it just more of just something that you adjusted to and it's just part of your everyday routine?
We were definitely confident going into it. We had the benefit of knowing what the match was going to be a couple weeks ahead of time, and basically being able to rehearse the match till we had it down to a T. So at least that part, which is a huge part of professional wrestling, is the spontaneity of it, and calling things on the fly and being able to adjust and listen and feel things out. That's a big part of it that only comes with being in front of those people. Luckily, we did have that benefit of being able to rehearse every single move, maneuver, and step in that match before going out and having our first match on that River City show that Don had arranged for us to all be on, including himself. Beyond that, there was a level of confidence. I knew that I didn't know everything. I knew that there was still a lot to learn, and I knew that the only way I was going to improve was by experience, getting my reps and getting my matches under my belt.
Talk about these first guys you worked with in the ring. These are some really old names here in the Winnipeg scene. John Walker, Steve Cox, Trey Valiant, and I believe, if I'm saying this correctly, the Great Wasabi. That's such a long time ago. Now look at the guys now and the stars that the local scene has produced. Working with these guys in 2001, are there any tips or pointers that they kind of taught you along the way having those first few matches, or was it just... Yeah, go ahead.
Those guys were a little bit later. I actually started in 1999. Some of those guys came a little bit later. Trey Valiant, I believe, was Ryan Price, who still makes an occasional appearance with CWE, and kind of, he's got a career as a magician, and it keeps him quite busy. But when he's able to, he'll come down to Rookies, or once in a while for our Rumble to Remember show. That's part of our tour on the Winnipeg stop. John Walker went by Dirty Dick Walker as well. He went by Mr. Pink. He had been around a while. He was, God bless his soul for trying, but I think he had hit a glass roof very early, and he wasn't the best guy to learn from. But even to this day, it's still very important to be in there with all kinds of people of different skill levels, abilities, and styles, because you're going to have to wrestle those people at one point or another. You can't just be in there with guys that are going to carry you and be in there with the best of the best. You got to be able to have a match with anyone with any set of abilities and cognitive skills as well.
Absolutely. You don't talk about 1999. That was you talked about making your debut then. My apologies. That was like a hot era in local wrestling. It was huge here. There's a lot of promotions running around. The Winnipeg Wrestling Wars just before that too. What was that like? Being a part of such a hot era, debuting in that time. Would you want to debut a later year looking back, or would you stick to 1999?
I liked the fact that it was so hot back then, because it helped get those jitters out, because wrestling attracted a crowd just based solely on the fact that it was wrestling. Wrestling was huge in the late 90s and early 2000s, so you could have a show at a community center with, there's no notable former television stars or anything like that on it, and you would have 100, 150 people easily. And you got over that fear of performing in front of a crowd pretty quick, if it was there at all. For some guys, it came pretty naturally. For some guys, it was really a slower learning curve of being out there in front of people and being able to talk and move and react fluently without kind of tensing up and being like, oh my God, all the eyes in this gigantic auditorium are on me right now, and what do I do, and freezing up. I think that was really beneficial and really helped a lot. And like I said, it was a weird time. There wasn't a whole lot of veteran leadership. There was some, but there was a whole lot of guys that were 12 months or less into being professional wrestlers. Like, I would say that was easily 2/3, if not 3/4 of our roster, which is unheard of. And so many guys under the age of 21 as well. So it looked like just a bunch of young kids in there. And
backyard.
Not quite, but thankfully there's not a lot of video footage floating around from that era. But the little bit that is, I look back at it, and it's, hey, that's how I started, and that's where we came from, and I've grown and learned a lot since then. But at the same time, it's like, oh God, I hope nobody I know sees this.
Absolutely. You were one of the first people, I actually got to create a connection and build a relationship on in the wrestling business in terms of learning and things like that. Back when I started going to the All right, and that there is another hot time in wrestling. You were one of the first people I've interacted with in wrestling and had a conversation with about the business growing up. But this one promoter is the first guy I ever talked to, the first guy I ever called in the business, and his name was Ernie Todd. And you worked for this individual in 2002, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. What was that?
Yeah.
What was that all about? That must have been a roller coaster ride.
It was 2002, yeah. So essentially what had happened was there was a little bit of kind of soap opera drama, surprise, surprise, with wrestling in the local scene where essentially the two major organizations that you were either one or the other of when I first began was you're part of River City Wrestling or Canadian Wrestling Federation. And guys would kind of go back and forth, and there was threats of lawsuits and all kinds of ridiculous, stuff like that. Exactly, yeah, just unnecessary trauma. And I was pretty far down the pecking order where really I just I didn't involve myself in it. I didn't go on the message boards. I just, showed up to the shows and, hey, what do you need me to do this week? And showed up to training, and that was that.
I think that was at the Le Rendezvous, isn't it?
It was, yeah. So eventually, Ernie Todd had purchased River City Wrestling from Wayne Stanton when Bobby J was in the middle of attempting to purchase it, and it was already, kind of public knowledge that Bobby J was going to take over ownership. So then Bobby J began his own organization, bought a ring, and it was called Top Rope Championship Wrestling. I was part of that for a little while, and eventually that kind of tapered off, and just, from the handful of years I had some friends that were in Canadian Wrestling Federation, CWF, namely Dick Blood, who, I spoke to and said, hey, maybe I can come over there. There's just a little bit more for me to do over there. And there was. So, Ernie was glad to have me. And I've heard a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about Ernie. I'm not saying they aren't true, but he was pretty cordial to me. He paid me what he promised to pay me. There was never... there was some kind of eye-rolling things that he would say where you're like, oh, okay, sure, Ernie, whatever you say. There's one story in particular that stands out to me. There was a time where he would always try to mirror the storylines and angles that were going on television, like very recent ones. So if they were doing very controversial stuff, he was doing very controversial stuff. He was doing the boss against the one Stone Cold Rebel. He needed one, rebel to rebel up against the boss. It was very clear that he was doing that. So anyways, he was trying to do as much controversial stuff as possible. And so basically we began but never finished an angle where both Gene Swan and Brian Jewell would interfere in my matches on my behalf to help me win, because both of them are under the impression that they are my father. And so I know this is an audio interview, and so for those of you who have, never seen visually myself or Gene Swan or Brian Jewell, I am of Irish descent, and those two gentlemen are of Canadian Aboriginal people descent. So they're clearly not related. It would be an honor to come from that kind of pedigree. They're both amazing wrestlers, and they're both great guys too, but physically, genetically, I just don't think it's possible. I don't think anybody was buying it, but that was Ernie's idea, and be damned if we weren't doing it.
That's you remember Herb Abrams from the UWF?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that, besides all the controversy on the side there with all the gimmicks. But like with Ernie Todd, he just kind of reminds me of that guy, just the storyline wise. It just kind of reminded me of that unique, off the ball UWF kind of product that they had. Like when Ernie ran shows, how many seats were filled? Like, was there big crowds back in that time?
Oh yeah, at the Rendezvous, he had huge crowds. He would bring in guys from BC and from Ontario. There was one time there was a carload he brought up a couple times. He called them the Cambridge Connection from Cambridge, Ontario, and these guys were great wrestlers. One of which was a pre-TNA Eric Young, and a couple other guys who I'm sure have all since retired. Matt Bomber, the Hacker, Floyd Osborne, the Gnarly Hippie, Fatboy JC Owens, and forgive me if I'm forgetting anybody, but these guys were all great wrestlers, and so it was really the first experience of a promoter bringing in guys from other areas for me that where it's like, okay, let's mix and match. Let's put, instead of you guys all wrestling each other over and over and over again, just going through the roster from A to Z and then back up to A again, let's give you guys some new guys to wrestle from and kind of learn something a little different and pick something up from and talk to and network with. And, and that's really become a thing now where it's almost unheard of not to do that. But back then, that was kind of like, oh, wow, we got some guys from a different organization coming to wrestle with us. That's huge.
I remember after all that whole hot era in the Winnipeg wrestling scene, you took quite a hiatus. You took quite some time off.
Yes.
And I remember during that time off, that's when you started to introduce me to the shows and introduce me to the talent and all the guys. And, for something like that, something I could always admire and respect because, without you and getting that good first impression with everybody, God knows what possibility I even have. So, but my question to you in reference to that was, like, you took quite a long time off. Was that like just personal wish not to talk about it, or were you just not like really passionate about the product anymore at that certain time after the hotness was kind of dying down?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. I joined an organization called Ringmasters Entertainment, RME, and at first it was kind of fun, and it was, okay, here's what we promised to be, and here's what we're doing, and then everything that he kind of said, here's what I promised will and won't happen, they did the opposite of. It was a guy by the name of Angus, who was a ring announcer for CWF, and it fell apart fast, and it just started becoming this huge chore. It wasn't fun anymore to show up to a show. It just became a big, oh God, I'm obligated to go to this. It just stopped being fun, and there was no real kind of, hey, you know what? I think today's going to be my last show. It was just kind of, hey, available for this one? Nah, I just did one last week, and it was a big drag, and I was there from early in the morning to late at night because, there was no incentive for anybody to do any of the extras. So, me just being me, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll help poster and flyer. Yeah, sure, I'll help set up the ring. Oh, it's just me and Corey Kincaid doing it. Okay, yeah, and easy. Okay, yeah, sure, I'll help tear down the ring. Oh, it's us three again. Wow, look at that. And it just made for such long, dragged out, just bad days where it's just like, okay, I don't know if this is something I want to continue to, do day in, day out. So I took a hiatus, like you said. It was, a couple of years, and then Danny started running Canadian Wrestling's Elite, and he did his first Rumble to Remember, in which it became an annual thing where some blasts from the past appearances would show up in it, and we had discussed me being a part of it, and once I came back to it, I thought, hey, this is something I can get back into again. And by that time, I had really taken my, my fitness and physicality a lot more serious. And so it was a little more of an athletic factor with me and a little more of a believability factor as well, too. And it just kind of skyrocketed from there.
Now, I can't remember. Did you do any work for Tony Condello before?
I have, yes. Most of that Don would line up for us, though, in our early days. That was also one of the benefits of being one of Don's students. Is anytime Tony Condello ran a show, he would make sure that we were a part of it as long as we were available. Those were fun. But essentially, even at that point, and it was one of our early shows. We did it at the University of Manitoba, and we had Kurgan on the show. Tony really wasn't very hands-on with anything aside from shaking your hand, saying, "Hey, thanks for coming down," and then handing out the pay. Don would book it. Don would kind of, "Hey, we're short on time. Hey, you need to put in time. Hey, whatever kind of thing. Like, here's what I need from you. Good match. Hey, here's what you need to improve on." That kind of thing. Giving people feedback. It was mostly Don running the show with Tony's name attached to it, more or less.
Okay. Yeah. Just like to ask because anybody that gets to work for Mr. Condello is obviously it's an honor. So it's
yeah, and the times I did, it was a great experience. We did a show in, I want to say it was 2000, maybe 2001, somewhere in there. Garden City was the name of the venue, and it had, I would say, pushing 1,000 people. And the main event of the show, the ECW was still in existence at the time. Rhino was the ECW television champion, and it was Rhino versus Jerry Lynn was the main event. It was crazy to be on, that young and that early into business, to be on a show with two guys back before, the contracts CW were structured in a way where these guys could still do outside bookings. So it was two guys that were currently on TV, and here we are all on a show together. It was pretty cool as a young guy to be able to be part of that.
You also had 2 matches in high impact wrestling, getting out there in Saskatchewan. A little bit of a similar style to CWE, in which now CWE does shows in Saskatchewan now, thanks to the great talent of HIW, which sold their organization. But talk about that. I made that road trip once. I thought it was a really good experience. Anything to stand out about HIW? Any stories working there?
Yeah, it was a fun time. It was Danny and Canadian Wrestling's Elite had a good working relationship with the promoter at HIW. So sometimes when bringing in a former WWE WCW name, they would kind of piggyback off each other. It's like, okay, I'm doing a tour of these 6 dates. Do you want to use him dates after that? Just from our last show, he can go on to your first show and do a couple dates. And it was, yeah, no, whatever. They go halfers on the plane and, just make things a little more economic for everybody. So this tour had Tito Santana on it, and Tito was awesome. Him and I drove together the whole tour. Just great guy. Like, it was like driving with a rock star, the stories he had. But I digress. Anyway, so Danny said, hey, well, we got one more show. He's short a guy in York. Can you come do it? And my family lives in Melita, Manitoba, which isn't too far from there. And I was going to go spend a couple days down on the farm after. I said, yeah, sure, I'll come. I'd love to, come to the Yorkton show, work for a different promoter, and just head down to my mom's place afterwards. So I got to work a guy who's about the same age as me. He was a little newer into the wrestling business because he had spent some time as a mixed martial artist, actually, and then he transitioned over to professional wrestling by the name of Bobby Gamble. Yeah, and he was a great guy, great to work with. Yeah, we had a fun little match, and then the show. I remember the show being extremely long, like time wise, and there was a battle royal at the end. I thought, oh my God, okay, cool, whatever. And I got into this battle royal, and I really, now it's all a blur who was who, but every single guy I was doing something with was just throwing stiff punches, and I was like, did I, fuck one of you guys' wives or something? What the hell, man? But that's just how they were. That's just, I guess, how these guys work. It was nothing personal against me. I was like, throw me out, dude. Yeah. So out I went, and that was that. We got changed. It was just me, Danny, AJ, and Tito that went on to do the show. Tito continued on with them, and me, Danny, and AJ had a quick bite to eat, and off we went.
I want to talk about, one of the big questions is obviously the experience you've had with all the big names that CWE brought in, because, you were the guy that picks them up and everything. I want to go into that, but let's talk about 2012 into retrospect here. When sure. CWE all, they ran shows at the Northern. They ran shows, and they did shows in Souris and in the Verdun. They did those small little tours as well. I also did, I think it was the one venue in the North End. I forget what it's called, the Fraternal Hall. So these are really early days, working with the likes of Darren Dalton, Vance Nevada. You also worked with Tito Santana as well against AJ Sanchez and Vance Nevada. So that's a great first year, coming back to CWE, working with these names. So what was the two-part question on the first question here on CWE? How was the Northern Hotel venue? Was that a little harder to work in due to the environment, or was that just something that's part of the everyday office job?
No, not at all. That was a little more intimate, interactive, so to speak. That was a blast. I loved working at the Northern just because there wasn't a person in there. So for me, as a heel character. So as a heel character, a villainous character, my job is to make every person in that place, screaming for my blood, right? And that was one of the venues where it was the absolute easiest to go out there, just be a prick, and every person in that building's, yelling like, "Hey, kill that fucker, take his head off, destroy it." It was so much fun. The people gave you what you were trying to get out of them. I loved working there. I know there's some guys that were kind of dicey on even being in that end of town, and that's fine, to each their own. Not everybody has the same experiences and the same perspectives on things, but for me, I loved it. It was great. It was a great atmosphere.
Absolutely. Now talk about these names. I remember, usually the routine is Danny Duggan, great guy, shout out, always lets me do these interviews after the show. So what I would always do is I would always wait for them. And it was perfect because you were picking these guys up. And before you left, you were nice enough to sit there on the bench, like for, you remember this, like for 20 minutes,
Yep.
and I would like interview these guys, and Danny was throwing a lot of names at me because anybody he was booking on my show was almost a next to nothing guarantee on my podcast. So, that was amazing for me to have that interaction. But you got that personal interaction, you got to road with them, you got to talk football with Scott Steiner. You had so many good moments. So, what are, let's do a top three. We do a top three with every interview here. Who are the top three guys that you've been on the road with in terms of bigger names?
Oh God. Let me think about that one. So top three, top three as in top three biggest names, or top three as in my top three favorite?
Top three favorite experiences. Guys that were just down there if you enjoyed it.
I'd have to say Chris Masters. Chris Masters, just an awesome, awesome dude from the second I grabbed him at the airport to the second we had to see him off. I believe that tour was 5 days or 6 days. And he was nothing but just a chill, fun, bust his ass in the ring, have 1,000 laughs with, go for a bite to eat, just a couple times, as me and my girlfriend go to Denny's for a bite to eat kind of thing. And he was just the coolest guy. Let's have a drink. Let's have, whatever else we want to, whatever. Just an awesome, awesome dude, always up for hey, what's the after party like tonight? There really isn't one. We'll just go for a bite to eat. Cool. Or hey, it's at this nightclub after the show. Hey, cool. He didn't care. He was down for all of it. And he was so great, so easy to work with, so easy to get along with. And we still shoot a text back and forth here and there to this day. Just super, super cool dude. I would have to say Scott Steiner. And again, some people are like, oh, he's a little standoffish and he's a little rough around the edges. And some people even are like, oh, he's a jerk. I'm like, man, Scott was cool.
No, he's not.
Yeah, and again, we rode together, and he's intense, but at the same time, huge NFL fan. So right out of the gates, it was, a 2 or 3 hour drive one of the days, and we're just sitting there it was a nonstop, up and down the NFL, 32 team rosters kind of thing, right? And I could tell he was loving it, right? And again, laughing and joking, just and he, how you see him on. In these interviews on TV, he's not turning on a character. That's how he is. So on the very last night of the tour, we're in Morden, and there's the hotel sponsor at the time also has a lounge, and I don't recall the name of the lounge, but whatever, they serve food there. So the whole bunch of us all go there to help, support the sponsor and, keep that relationship strong. And so there's a large table of us, and the waitress comes over to take everybody's order. And no matter where we went, Scott needed to have a steak. Hey, let's go to Denny's. Got steak. Let's go to Boss Pizza because they got steak there. He ate 1, if not 2 steaks a day wherever we went. And so she's going around taking everyone's order, and he's sitting next to me. And then so she asks his order first, and he gets a steak and shrimp. And then they come to me next, and I go, I'll get a Cajun chicken wrap, please. And he just interrupts. Oh shit! Find one of what I'm having and put it on my tab. Appreciate everything you've done for me, brother. Such an awesome guy. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna argue with you, dude. So he's definitely in the top 3. This is no particular order. This isn't first, second, and third or anything like that. And then oh god, there's just been so many cool let me think on this third one here. I'd probably have to say Jake Roberts for the third one, because again, what you see and what you get with him, that's him, man. That's how he is 24/7, and he's a stand-up comedian nonstop. And the stuff that comes out of his mouth, you don't want children in the room if he's speaking, period. And actually, as a matter of fact, so one of the times that Jacob came in, Danny was away, and so it was for the C4 Comic Con, and so they had reached out to Danny ahead of time and said, hey, can him and there's 2 or 3 other wrestlers that were brought in, former WWE stars that were brought in, can they come down and do a question and answer session? He said, well, I really can't, because my arrangement with them isn't a flat rate. They make a percentage off their sales, so anytime they're away from their table is time that they're losing money. So it really doesn't work with the the business relationship we have with them. And they said, okay, sure, no problem. So we were doing little blocks where there was a couple matches, and then there'd be a break, and then a couple matches, there'd be a break, and the WWE stars that were there, they weren't doing matches. They were just strictly there for signings. And so anyways, while we were in the middle of the matches, the one of the organizers of the event snuck over to the table and said, "Oh, hey, it's we have this arrangement where you're doing this Q&A session. I'm supposed to come get you." And so, somebody comes and gets me, the ring announcer, or whatever, comes and gets me and says, "Hey, they're taking it away." And I was like, "Oh, fuck's sakes, they asked us about this." And we said no. So I get over there. They're outside the door. I said, "Hey, this isn't cool. Like, you had asked us this. We said no because of the nature of our business arrangement that we can't do this, right? Because we can't take time away from their time at their table." And then and the person tried to play it off like, "Oh, really? Because there's all these people in there already waiting, and they have questions for these three wrestlers." And it was Tito, actually. It was Tito, Jake the Snake, and Victoria. And so all three of them were like, "Look, Kev, it's okay. Just, we'll go in, we'll answer the questions. It's fine. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. I feel horrible." And then they're like, "No, don't worry." Because then we look like the assholes if everyone's waiting for us and we say no, for whatever. We'll keep it short. And then Jake puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, "Don't worry, brother. I got this." So we go in there, and there's more kids than there is adults in this room. And so of course, Jake's the biggest star of the three. Not that the other two aren't, but Jake is definitely the one who people are there to see more than the other ones. And so a good majority of the questions are directed towards him. And every question, was, "Oh, do you remember the time you wrestled so and so and this happened on this and this episode?" And he's just, "Oh, fuck, we were so fucking high in those days. I remember that. Oh, fucking blur, dude. Oh, shit. I wish I had an answer for you." And you can just see the folder like, "Oh, my God." Like the event organizer, "Oh, my God, just trying to hurry things along." Yeah, they got us out of there pretty quick anyway. Jake's looking over at me, winking and smiling. I'm like, "Oh, you are awesome. You're the best, Jake."
Oh, man. I remember that, too. I asked Jake for an interview that day, and you know what? He was busy selling. That was my own fault. But I remember, actually, that there was one of my biggest regrets of my podcasting career is because Rob Van Dam was booked, too. I think this was the time Rob Van Dam was booked for CWE2 doing these signings. So
Yeah.
What do? I go to Rob Van Dam's table, ask him nicely for an interview. The guy says yes. What do? I don't know why. I somehow just go home. I was waiting an hour. I go home. And then he looked for me. And then I missed it. It was just terrible. I remember that day. All I had to do was buy a hot dog or buy a drink and wait. And then I remember that day. But I was not there for that Jake thing. And I really wish I would. I would have cheered up the day, that's for sure. It's pretty immense. I miss those C4 shows because it's really interactive. And it's a good way to get non-wrestling fans that are interested in similar topics of entertainment into wrestling. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was agreeing. Yes, exactly.
Look at the Japanese product. Japanese, it doesn't have to be Japanese wrestling, but a lot of it relates to each other because it catches the eye. It catches awe. And I feel like wrestling at the Comic-Con does that because you have a ring there. It looks nice. I think it's that blue ring that they have. And I remember that ring. That was literally, that catches an eye. And I feel like more Comic-Con shows need to be done to spread the word of local wrestling. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, definitely helps get some eyes on the product that, maybe weren't aware of it before. But we got a little in the weeds a little there, Jordan. You said you had a two-part question. The first one was my top 3 names that I've toured with. And they, as I'm telling this, I'm thinking like, "Oh man, but Paul Orndorff was super cool too." And I'm like, "Oh man, Carlito was such a wicked dude." And I'm and like, "Oh man, like Jimmy Jacobs is so awesome." And like, "Oh man, the King of Rose, those are such cool fucking guys, man." And like, "Oh man, Chris Hero was so fucking good to me." And like, "Oh, I love Val. Like, I should have thrown him." Like it's so like there's that old saying, never meet your heroes. For whatever reason in wrestling, it's the opposite. Like there's very, very, very few of these guys who aren't just the coolest fucking guys to be on the road with and chill with. And one of the things that I enjoy most about it, and I think this is where you were heading with your second question, is that's where I do a lot of my learning. So some of these guys, when they come in, they have a seminar, and whether it be somebody who's been around a long time, like Val Venus or like a Vampiro or whatever, I'll attend that, and I'll always take something away. Or Scott Norton, another awesome dude. And sometimes, sometimes they don't have a seminar just for the just because of the time sensitivity of their flight in and flight out, it just sometimes isn't something that we can arrange, and that's cool too, but like we'll whether it's going for a bite to eat or just driving to head to the next town or whatever, like I don't sit there and bug them, but we have a conversation and they'll kind of eventually we'll get around to their perspectives on things, and then they're usually almost always cool enough to like, hey, do you mind check out my match and let me know what you think, or my promo or whatever kind of thing. And they've always there's always something to learn from these people, right? Because they've been places where we haven't, and that just about everybody in that locker rooms should be aspiring to get to, kind of thing, right? So it's such a great opportunity to just hang out, chill with these guys, and pick their brains and ask them questions and get to know their way of thinking and their approach and what they think of how I'm doing or what it is that maybe I'm not doing, and I've learned and grown so much just from that end of it, right? Just from meeting all these people that have had tremendous success and getting their input on what I shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Kevin? Having one of the top guys here in Winnipeg wrestling to share some great stories and great tales of our amazing history in the scene has been absolutely amazing. From RCW to CWE now. Well, I guess my last question would be, you play a huge role behind the scenes and on camera. You're even a commentator for CWE, which you can actually check out on YouTube, CWE TV. I'm going to be asking Road Warrior Animal about the Zubaz and how he created them. And he's going to even check the commercial out. So that's going to be
awesome.
Yeah, so that's going to be awesome stuff. So, like, CWE, my question for you is, all that TV work you've done, all that adrenaline is creating bigger things now for this company in terms of touring and things like that. When can people see the Canon Corporation in action in the future? And how can people across, not just in Winnipeg, across Canada, check out these great shows for more information?
These great shows are available, like you said, on YouTube on the CWE Wrestling channel, and there's some big things coming up ahead too, that in the very, very near future. Unfortunately, like the rest of the world, this virus that's out there has really hampered a lot of our livelihoods, but we're slowly but surely making our way back. And our next appearance for the Canon Corporation, we're September 3rd. We are in Oak Lake, Manitoba. That's just kind of north of Souris and west of Brandon. And then September 4th, we are back in Winnipeg's favorite wrestling venue, Rookie Sports Bar, out in Transcona. That is the Friday night of the long weekend. And then Saturday, CW makes its return to Flin Flon, Manitoba. Again, 8 hours north of the city, but hey, Flin Flon has always been really, really good to us. I remember traveling up there about 2 years ago with Scott Norton, and once again sharing some amazing stories and amazing perspectives on the wrestling industry, and just making an amazing friend, in general. But yeah, if you want to see some of the stars of Canadian wrestling's elite, including the Canon Corporation, head on down to Rookies, Oak Lake, or Flin Flon over the September long weekend, and hopefully we can provide some good entertainment for you, help take your mind off things for at least a couple hours.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin Cannon, thank you so much for being on the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Any final words from you and the corporation, perhaps?
Hey, man, like if all it takes is just checking out one match, one YouTube match, or one show or whatever, and it's not your thing, then it's not your thing. But I urge everyone out there, give it a try, because there are so many people that have thought, that wrestling is not really me, and then they've come to a show and they're like, oh my God, that was a blast. And some people came to a show and said, okay, yeah, it really wasn't for me, but you don't know until you try it. So please, 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 I urge everyone out there, support independent wrestling. If you haven't been to a show, go to at least one, check it out, see what it's all about. Who knows, you might find your new thing that you are into and that you can't miss an episode of.
Right on. Well, Kevin Cannon, thank you for being on the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Are you that wrestling fan looking for that perfect television package to meet your needs? Well, Real Aid Media has the perfect option for you. With the Wrestling Box promo, you pay for the box for $199.95. After that, you're only paying $29.95 per month with no contracts and no obligations. Real Aid Media also provides marketing services operating in 5 countries. To book an appointment, or to get your wrestling package, go to stevenbenzelock.bookify.com. That's Steven Benzelock at bookify.com. Check it out. Real Aid Media, providing great wrestling content for a cheap price. And thank you very much for listening to the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Those were both two interviews with none other than Austin Powers and the mastermind, Kevin Cannon. We're going to be back next week. We're going to have more interviews here on Jordan Garber Now every single Friday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. For myself, Jordan Garber, you guys have yourselves a great night. You guys are listening to the Jordan Garber Now podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.